Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. The way to look at phenomena, at reality, at our body, mind, and the outer world in accordance with the Buddhist teaching is to recognize the three characteristics, tailakkhana. This is really one of the most central or core teachings of the Buddha. It's the nature of all conditioned phenomena, characterized by these three attributes. Essentially, it defines the nature of conditioned or samsaric existence. And these are dukkha, anicca, anatta, suffering or unsatisfactory or imperfect, impermanent, and not self or empty or void. All three are related. They're aspects of the same fundamental reality. Conditioned existence is inherently unstable, without substance, and imperfect. Now, first of all, we say conditioned existence. And what do we mean by this term conditioned? This is a reference to the dependent origination, Paticca Samuppada, and the underlying concept that the elements of reality, internal, external, physical and mental, near and far, they're all arisen according to causes and conditions. Nothing is randomly occurring by chance or by arbitrariness. Things arise because of a multitude of factors. And properly understood, this is essentially another side or aspect of the three characteristics. Because things are dependently arisen, because they're dependent on other things, that means they're inherently, by their nature, we could say, works in progress. No phenomena is complete. No phenomena is self-generated or perfect in its own being. Everything arises according to this network of causes and conditions. So that means whatever point we isolate to look at in the whole fabric of reality, even if we take it down to the level of a single Dhamma, a point instant of reality, the smallest possible component, we see that because it's dependently arisen, it's imperfect. It's in transition. It's in the process of becoming something else. So this is a reflection of the quality or characteristic we call dukkha. Dukkha is a word that's really impossible to fully translate adequately with a single English word. It's traditionally been translated as suffering, and there is some context in which that works very well, and others when it doesn't. There are two problems with using the word suffering to translate dukkha. One is that not all phenomena are suffering in the narrow sense of the English word. There are phenomena that arise through the senses and in the mind that are classified as pleasant or neutral, but they're still dukkha. And the other problem is that by calling it suffering, we're emphasizing the subjective aspect, and this leads some people to imagine that dukkha is all in our own mind. It's only a fabrication, that actual reality is perfect, it's just we grasp it wrongly. That's not what's meant by dukkha. It's a quality that is inherent in the object itself. Every part of reality is dukkha in that it's imperfect, it's provisional, it's unsatisfying. That means that even the most pleasant experience possible in the conditioned existence, even experiences that are beyond the human, such as experiences in the Deva or even in the Brahma realm, they're still classified as dukkha, even though they would be marked by degrees of pleasure or bliss that are beyond what's experienced in the human level. They're still inherently conditioned, inherently imperfect. And on the subjective side, we say they're inherently unsatisfying because no object is capable of fully satisfying the mind. No conditioned object can end that hunger, that desire that's present in the mind. This is the fundamental error that beings fall into. They imagine, if I just get this or that, if I just have such and such, then I'll be happy. And they get that desired object, and there is some pleasure, longer or shorter lasting, but then it fades. Either the object goes away or the person grows tired or bored with it and is desiring something else. And on a level of individual mind moments, this is what we're doing continually, moment by moment. And this is something that is revealed in meditation. It's something that we should become aware of and experience for ourselves. Is the process of the mind is constantly repeating the same pattern, desires an object, and there's a kind of a longing or a hunger in the mind. The consciousness is seeking in a way to complete itself or to fulfill itself by taking an object. And the object is taken, and immediately it's found to be imperfect, unsatisfying, and the mind is moving on to the next object. This is essentially the dynamo of our whole psychology, and in fact of the whole universe. Is mind seeking an object, being unsatisfied, and moving on to the next object. It's inherently a sucker's game. It's a losing proposition. It never can be won. It's like the line from the old song, playing solitaire till dawn with a deck of 51. It's essentially the experience of samsaric becoming. And as I said, the three characteristics are all reflections of the same underlying reality. The second one, usually given in the list, is impermanence or anicca, which points out the transitory nature of existence, that everything is in flux. Nothing is constant or unchanging. Things are coming in and out of existence. And we see this on the scale of a human life with the realities of birth, sickness, old age, and death, that we're always moving towards our death, which is inevitable. But we see it on a finer grain scale, which is really the deepest penetration of the idea of anicca, is to see the momentary passing of phenomena, that these dhammas, these conditioned objects that the mind takes, they are passing out of existence as soon as they come into existence. That reality is essentially a flicker. Phenomena persist at their most fine-grained level, at the kind of a, loosely speaking, an atomic sort of level. They're momentary. There's a persistence of pattern, which gives the illusion of continuity, because of this conditionality of the universe, because things arise according to causes and conditions. Precisely because of that, one moment following another will be very similar to it. So it appears that things persist, but actually they're always constantly in a state of flux. Even very stable patterns that we take as being kind of background phenomena, like this earth and the sun and the mountains and the sea, they're actually in a state of change all the time. It may be on time scales that we don't perceive it changing in the human lifespan, but they are changing. All the mountains in the world are either rising up or weathering down. The Rockies are rising up because two plates are slowly grinding into each other. The Appalachians are wearing down because that tectonic action is finished in their case, and there's just the weathering of the atmosphere and the rain slowly wearing them down. But from the scale of a human lifetime, we don't see them change, so we take them in our minds as an illusion of permanence. And the third characteristic is anatta, not self. This is the direct literal translation of the word anatta. Atta is, or Atman in Sanskrit, is self, and A or An is the negative prefix. So this is saying not self. And it applies on the human level to the idea of no abiding person. There's just a flux of phenomena of mind and body. But this too applies at a finer grain to individual momentary dhammas. Although here generally we use the, instead of anatta, we say sunyata, voidness. This is merely a linguistic distinction because I think ancient India attributed an atta or an atman to a person, but no one would attribute that to a single momentary dhamma, a point incident, an atom. No one would say it has a self-nature, but the dhamma itself is empty, is void of inherent substance. There is a way of looking at this or understanding this in terms of ancient Indian philosophy. There was a concept, svabhava, which literally means the own being or own essence. And this is quite parallel to a principle in Greek philosophy, in Aristotle, of quality and essence. There's an idea that things had an inherent essence or uh, substantial existence, and that this could be colored or laid over with various qualities. And this was a kind of a fundamental idea in a lot of thought in both India and in Greece. This is the way they looked at fundamental reality of things. But the Buddha had a radical insight, and he did away with this concept and said there is no svabhava, there is no own essence. Things are not substantial. There may be qualities such as color and odor and size and many sort of defining things we generally use sort of adjectives to talk about, but there's no bearer of those things. There's no intrinsic essence. When you strip away the qualities, there's nothing else. There's a really neat phrase, and it comes from Tibetan Buddhist text, that things do not exist from their own side. This is what we're talking about here, and this again ties into the conditionality, the dependent origination. Is the idea of things having an own essence or being substantial is counter to the concept of things being totally conditioned and a product of other things. Nothing exists from its own side means nothing is essential in its own nature. It's only defined, it only exists because of interaction of other phenomena, which themselves are empty and derivative. Condition, the whole conditioned samsaric universe is like this. There's nothing anywhere that's the essential core. There's only a play, a flux of forces and qualities, sort of an interweaving of vectors. And it's only our minds that perceive wrongly that there's substantial, compact substances or things. If we see the world in this way, this is called Yatabhuta Nanadasana, knowledge and vision of things as they actually are. This is seeing according to reality. It's clear seeing, which is what we strive for in a meditation called Vipassana, which is translated literally as clear seeing, the unobstructed seeing. Seeing the contents, the phenomena that arise in the mind as being empty, impermanent, and imperfect. And when we see things in this way, that's the dawning of wisdom. That's the beginning of breaking free of conditionality itself. It's like a magic spell has been dissolved. Before that, we're bewildered and deluded. There's a concept that's called the vipalasas, which is usually translated as the hallucinations. And that means seeing things wrongly, being fooled into seeing the insubstantial as substantial, suffering as pleasure, or imperfection as perfection, seeing dukkha as sukha, and seeing the impermanent as permanent. And this is common way of seeing things in the world, but it's a false way of seeing. It's a hallucination. In one of the Buddha's teaching stories, one of his parables, he says the vipalasas are a trick of Mara, and they're like a hunter wants to catch deer, and he makes a statue, a dummy of a deer out of grass and sticks, and he puts it in the middle of a clearing, and he hides in the bush in the side. And the deer come and they see this dummy in the middle of the clearing, and they say, "This place is safe. There's already a deer here." And they come into the clearing, and he shoots them with his bow and arrow, because they are fooled by their perception. They're seeing that which is unreal as real. And he says this is like the vipalasas. They lead us to our destruction. Meaning they keep us bound to this condition, becoming this cycle of birth and death and birth and death that we've been trapped in from innumerable lifetimes. And the way out is to see clearly, is to not be caught in that process any longer, not to be fooled, to see clearly and see with understanding. And this is the result of breaking that enchantment and allowing the mind to begin to disengage from that process of seeking an object, taking an object, becoming dissatisfied with the object, and seeking the next object, which is the primordial or fundamental addiction. This is what the mind has been doing since beginningless time. And it's only by seeing clearly through it and understanding its nature that we can begin to unravel from that and experience a disengagement, disenchantment, and eventually the process can be ended. The mind can just stop doing that. And this means disengaging from the game or the process of samsara and doing a kind of fourth dimensional sideways side shuffle, as it were, not doing that anymore, and alighting upon the unconditioned, the realization of nibbana. Which is only possible when we've completely seen through the fabric of the conditioned, then we can light upon the unconditioned.